Senator Heitkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to get to a story that was just released in the last probably 20 hours, which is that ISIS is cutting the salaries of their fighters in half. And I think it was unclear how they were dealing with food stipends. I think the food stipends they thought were fairly consistent, but the stipends for children and for wives. And that's got to be an indicator of some challenges that they're experiencing right now. And I want your reaction to kind of the financial aspects of this, how we can do a better job to cripple this organization from a financial standpoint. I think $26 oil is having a pretty dramatic effect. But beyond that, what does this reduction in salaries and assets mean for this organization, for this terrorist organization, and how can we further flame the financial challenges of ISIS? And we'll just like everyone's reaction.
So I'm of the view that ISIS is actually losing and has been actually for quite a few months now, not only territory, but also financially. One of the ways in which that can be furthered financially is to have better control over private financial flows out of the Persian Gulf. And here I'm specifically talking about the countries of Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia.
And I just will interrupt and say this is exactly, we recently were on a trip to the Mideast, and this is exactly supported by what we heard there.
Yeah, and they're definitely trying to do this. The problem is that many of the payments take the form of cash bags that are carried across the border. So getting the Turks on board, because that's where often the cash is carried through, is extremely important. But I mean, I think that would be very important. And then the way in which we're using special forces, in particular with the Kurds, is I think a model that should be replicated with other fighting groups on the ground. That's proving extremely effective as well.
Okay. Dr. Stern?
I guess one question I'd want to ask is, are they cutting the salaries of propagandists? We know that the propagandists are actually paid more than the fighters, from a really good story in the Washington Post.
There is an indication in these that it's across the board that all salaries are being reduced, not just fighter salaries. But again, you know, this is based on intel that we're receiving, you know, that's being reported.
Yeah. So this is a very, very good sign. Stopping the sale of oil from ISIS to inside Syria, that is obviously pretty hard to accomplish. I mean, also they make money from so many different operations. They're selling amphetamines, Capticon. They're managing to get those antiquities out. So, I mean, this has to be a major effort to stop both the flow of foreign fighters in and goods out. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's great. If this is happening, it's great.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I think the emphasis on Turkey is there. It's all really about Turkey. Yes, the Gulf states for private donations, which are very difficult, but probably the crucial role there has to be played by Turkey. I think what concerns me also to some degree is how of the many places ISIS has expanded to, Libya is probably also from a financial point of view particularly concerning, because it is starting to control a part of Libya that is very crucial from an oil point of view and from an immigration point of view. It's sort of the end of a route that starts in sub-Saharan Africa, where all sort of goods and refugees are sort of imported to Libya, and it's a gateway to Europe. So there's a reason why ISIS is focusing on that part of Libya specifically, and it's even telling its fighters not to go to Syria and Iraq any longer, but actually to shift to Libya. It's obviously because there's a political vacuum there, it's an opportunity, but it's a big financial opportunity as well.
Okay.
I think for some of the cases we've seen here in the United States, financial incentives are important. So them learning about a reduction, I think, would hopefully reduce incentives to go. We had one case in particular, Mona Abusala, who talked about how he had food in his truck all the time, and that it was so great to have these resources in the caliphate. So I think that's a very important issue. And what we've mentioned already, the Department of Treasury, OFAC, all of their financial control systems, designating more individuals to stop the flow of money, reducing the price of oil, and anything we could do to cut off their ability to provide financial incentives is important.
I know earlier we had this conversation about what is, in fact, the root causes, and I think we could all argue that feeding someone's family and providing a salary in a war-torn area may, in fact, be a great incentive beyond the ideology, beyond the broader mission. And one of the things that has arisen in this discussion is never mind the migration of refugees to this country, but once they are here, the need to provide social services so we don't see radicalization. We could vet folks all we wanted, but once they come here, if they're alienated, if they feel isolated, if they feel separated from the communities that they're living in, that's another risk factor. And so, want I guess, Doctor, you to expand. I thought it was an important point that I want to reemphasize here, because I don't think anyone here is talking about eliminating refugees. What we're talking about is vetting them appropriately on the front end, but you raise a very important point, which is there are risk factors if we do not manage the refugee population, if we do not assist the refugee population once they're here.
Absolutely. I mean, Lorenzo mentioned the fact that they weren't radicalized before they came and the small number of cases, but populations, I mean, case in point is Minnesota. So when you do a large resettlement effort.
You're talking about the Somalis.
Yes. The resettlement agencies tend to focus on particular communities and continue to put refugees in a single place, thinking that they are creating a circle of resources. But the problem is it also can ghettoize communities and not allow them to adjust and integrate. So it's very important that there are social service provided, and there's also community service opportunities, other kinds of community-based programs that will help them to integrate in mainstream society, English language training, all sorts of job, vocational training, to make sure that once we do welcome refugees, which is a very important part of our society, that they do become, productive, healthy, integrated American citizens.
Yeah, I just wanted to reemphasize that point, because I think that as we are rightfully focused on what is the appropriate vetting process, we still have these challenges moving forward. And if we as a country do not have a more unified message, we risk our national security in not managing the refugee population that we have.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.